The issue of marijuana cultivation and impacts on water quality has been, it's fairly new on the scene, but there have been entities and people working on it for quite a while. Up in Region 1 of our Fish and Game office, the northern region on the coast, the coastal area, out of Eureka, Scott Bauer's been working on it. Now, Scott was supposed to give the presentation, but I think that he's saying something about the director went up there to go for a flight to check out some of the sites, the marijuana sites, or just to see the impact of it, because some people truly don't understand. You will get some ideas of it from this next presentation by Jen Olson. She's going to step in for Scott, but Jen, and later on you'll meet Adam, have been working in the field for Scott for quite a while. I left the bio, but I probably don't need it. They are the ground truthing part of this project and trying to get it together. They've been doing a lot of work on map. Well, you'll see the work they've been doing. But this first presentation is just going to set up the problem, the potential problem of marijuana, how it's increasing and stuff. And then the next two presentations, mine is going to be much shorter than I say it's going to be, and Adam's after that, are going to be potential plans for monitoring, trying to get to the question, is marijuana cultivation a significant water quality problem in the north and, as you'll see, in the Central Valley. So we're just starting to scratch this. This is the first time we've presented something like this at the CABW, and I suspect there'll probably be more of these presentations in the future. So Jen, why don't you get us started with some scary stuff?
All right. It's almost Halloween, so.
Yes, it is almost Halloween.
All right. Ooh. Oh, good. Good. So we're all set. All right. So I'm going to try to keep it to 20 minutes here under, so maybe we'll have time for questions. And as Jim said, I'm here in place of Scott Bauer, who couldn't make it. I deal more with the office and GIS analysis that we do. I don't deal with the regulatory side, so Scott would do a little bit better job of laying out some of these violations that we see, but I'm going to attempt to do the subject justice, so here we go. So we're talking about impacts from marijuana cultivation on private land, and we're talking specifically about the Emerald Triangle, Humboldt, Trinity, and Mendocino County. And just to give you some geographic context there, that's not to say that marijuana cultivation isn't an issue in other areas, but this is an area that's historically known for its marijuana cultivation, its ties to the industry. And just to give you some idea of the scope of the problem, an estimate from the Humboldt County Sheriff's Office says that there are approximately 4,000 grows in Humboldt County alone. So if you extrapolate out to the other counties, it's a pretty big issue there. And I should say before I get started too that marijuana isn't really what we're concerned about here. We're concerned about some of the land use practices that are associated with this agriculture. And another reason why the Emerald Triangle is such an important place for marijuana cultivation, or became such a popular place, is because it's very rugged terrain, it's very remote, and it's easy to hide there. So it may not be the best place in terms of climate or geography to grow, but it's become a place where people can go and do this remote agriculture. So what is the problem? We have this quasi-legal status, Proposition 215, increased growth in the industry. So marijuana is legal for medicinal purposes, but not for other uses. And so we saw a growth in the industry, and our regulations have lagged behind. So here are just a couple of images. This is just to show you that you have this really nice, glossy sign up at the top, and then you have this kind of dumpy-looking trailer with a bunch of marijuana plants in front of it. And you might think that maybe this site on the bottom was the site with all the environmental violations, and that it's a nasty site or something, but actually we checked out that site, and it was all just fine by us. So that's part of the gray area here and the kind of fuzziness of this industry. You never know who's doing a good job and who's doing a bad job, and just the the quasi-legal status has let a lot of bad actors come in and do some pretty egregious things on the landscape. So as the industry has grown, the price has also dropped, and that's the market's been flooded, and it requires a larger operation to make the same amount of money, so we did see a large increase. And with that, we saw more investments in operations on private lands. So, you know, you hear a lot about the public lands, trespass grows. What we're seeing is people are moving on to these smaller parcels of private land. And then with that, some environmental crimes are being committed, but it's challenging to access those sites and enforce the regulations. So I included this map, which is a part of the research that Adam is going to present to you later. And I just wanted to include this map to show you that marijuana cultivation is common in some rural areas. So this is a watershed in southern Humboldt County. The red dots are outdoor grows and the green dots are greenhouses. And as you can see, there's an association here with marijuana cultivation and this rural residential land use description. So it's not public lands and it's not these large tracts of private lands. It's these smaller parcelized and subdivided areas. And in addition, we see an increase in the number and size of greenhouses. So for one of our analyses that Adam's going to present to you later, and I'm just giving you this background to show you how the industry has grown. So there were 101 greenhouses present in this watershed in 2006, and then 220 more appeared between 2006 and 2012. So that, if you watch the dots, that's a large increase. So just a total there, and the size of the watershed that we're talking about. This is Redwood Creek watershed, southern Humboldt County. It's near the town of Redway. And this is just one example, obviously, but we do see this pattern repeated in other watersheds. So we are also seeing new techniques which increase the yield and extend the growing season for marijuana cultivation. And one of these techniques is light deprivation. So if you'll notice the black plastic, that's used to cover the plants and manipulate the photoperiod to sort of trick those plants into flowering at other times of the year so that these growers can get multiple harvests in 1 year. And then there's another new technique that I just learned about, and apparently it's called glow worming. So you actually put lights inside the greenhouse, and then the greenhouse can have light at all times of the day, or you can control the lighting and, again, control when those plants flower. And so I guess when they're all lit up at night out on the landscape in some of these areas, they look like little glowworms. So I learn new things all the time. So because of the issues that we see associated with this industry, our office has formed a unique law enforcement and habitat conservation partnership where our environmental scientists will go out on these raids and work with our game wardens in order to more effectively assess these violations. So what are the resource impacts that we see when we go out on these violation sites? So one big one that I'm sure you're all aware of are water diversions, especially during low flow periods with no screens or inadequate screening, and then oversized pumps. And I'm just going to go through 4 of these impacts as a quick overview, and then I'm going to give you some more detail on some of these sites that we've been on. So the photos that I'm showing with each of these are just sort of an example of some different types of these impacts that we see. I'll go into more detail later. This is a huge one, conversion or fragmentation of lands, conversion of forested habitats to agricultural land, a lot of land clearing and illegal timber harvesting. And then a lack of best management practices, no riparian or stream protection areas. You can see in this photo I've just drawn in the blue line where the stream channel should be, and it's been filled in with debris there, and obviously there's no buffer. And then the pollutants, so we see sediment, petroleum products close to creeks. The photos are some fertilizers that are used. And then killing agents, you'll hear a lot about the anticoagulant rodenticides in conjunction with those trespass grows on public lands. We don't see those as much on the private lands grows, but we do see things like pesticides and other toxicants. So this is just a little story about one particular grow to kind of illustrate the water demands that we see. And this grow had signs all over the place to let our agents know that this was a spring-fed and watered medical marijuana garden that was grown in accordance with all regulations, and everything was up to snuff. But when we looked a little more closely, so on the right is an overview, and that red dot is the area of the spring. And then on the left is how much water was actually coming out of that spring. So if you can see the strip down the middle is all marijuana plants. There are over 100 marijuana plants there. That trickle of water is certainly not enough water to provide for all of those plants, each of which can take up to 6 gallons of water per day. So it didn't come out very well, but that was a bright blue line on my screen to the left of the grow there, and that's a coho stream. So as you might guess, the water was actually coming from the coho stream. They had dug a very sneaky little channel and installed a submersible pump, and that's Jane Arnold from our office who goes out on a lot of these sites. So our environmental scientists and game wardens were able to find the illegal diversion, luckily, and that's another sign there. Our game warden's holding it, and that sign lives in our office now. So some fun things to take home. Another illegal water diversion here, this is the Van Dusen River. You can see all of the white piping around the plants, so that's delivering water to all of those plants. And as you can see, it's a low flow period in the photo, and the Van Dusen River is on its way to kind of becoming disconnected there. And upstream of this grow, there's a population of summer steelhead as well. So you can see this is a concern for us. And then we see also streams diverted at the headwaters. So they'll sink kind of a tub there and take all of the flow from the headwaters. The picture on the right, you can see there's a generator there. So again, talking about petroleum products in close proximity to streams. And then, of course, diversion screening, so improperly sized fish screens. When you have too small of a screen for the size of the water pipe that's taking up the water, you'll suck fish into it and cause fish mortality. And then habitat fragmentation, so Post Mountain is an area in Trinity County. Basin Gulch there that runs down the middle connects to Rattlesnake Creek, which is a tributary to the South Fork Trinity River, which is a wild and scenic river. And this area is surrounded by national forest land. So this is 2005, and then this is 2012. So this is a pretty egregious example of habitat fragmentation. Not all of our sites look like this, but this is an example of what can and does happen. So I'm just gonna go back just to show you. And this area, the entire area that's kind of impacted and subdivided and used for marijuana cultivation, it's a 9 square mile area, and there are over 400 grows right in that area. So that's what it looks like up close. So this is not from that site, but this is what these large areas of grading and land clearing can look like. Just for scale, so that is a backhoe there, and then there's a travel trailer there, and then 3 small tanks here. And so this is a very large area, and those greenhouses are 200 feet long. So large areas of grading and clearing. And then again, you can see the people in there for scale. So this is a large area that's been cleared and leveled, and then those divots are where plants were growing and where plants will be grown again. And there's leftover potting soil in there. But the other thing that I should mention, which has always been kind of interesting to me, is that the soil really doesn't matter. So we've found grows that are on serpentine soils and in pygmy forests, and people aren't utilizing the soil for growing their trucking and potting soil. And it's not about, as I said before, it's not really about the habitat that's there or the, whether or not it's good for agriculture. It's just whether or not you can get away with it where you are. So, and then this, again, this is the timber from this site. So we see a lot of illegal timber harvesting associated with this industry. And then a lack of best management practices on roads or many other construction features, and we're concerned with sediment delivery to streams. And then this is the closest thing. I told Jim that I wouldn't scare you and that I would tell a joke, but this is the closest thing that I have to a joke. And it's really not that funny, but this guy thought that he was gonna make some kind of road crossing, and he ended up just getting his little earth mover stuck, and we actually had to pull it out. So that's not really that funny. It's kind of sad. But before he got it stuck, he managed to construct this beautiful crossing. So we just see all these really poorly constructed features. And people are trying to, they're trying to kind of go big really fast, grow a lot of marijuana, get a lot of money very quickly, and a lot of times these people are from out of town and they don't have any real connection to the area. And so we see things like this because they're just gonna leave anyway. And then again, poorly constructed features. So these ponds are a big issue. This one is perched on a pretty steep area. When this pond fails, because it's poorly constructed, it's going to deliver a large amount of sediment. And again, taking water, no bypass flows. The plastic liners are pretty bad for wildlife as well. Things will get in and can't get back out. And then pollutants near and in stream. So people use generators to power lights for greenhouses, water pumps, all kinds of things. And so we do see a lot of generators and fuel for generators near and in stream, and then eventually this can happen. So this is a diesel spill that happened upslope and filtered down through and into the creek. And then again, just trash in the streams. Those are all soil bags, those kind of camo-looking bags there. Those are 707 brand, and that is the area code up in Humboldt. And then concrete, we do see people trying to make these dams where they'll just pour concrete directly into the stream, and that's a huge issue for affecting pH of streams and can be lethal for fish and other aquatic organisms. And then septic in or near streams, obviously that's an issue. I don't have to tell anyone why. Soil dump near a grub of a creek, fertilizers, fungicides, leaching down. So a lot of times people don't reuse the soil either. If there's something, some kind of mold or fungus issue, there'll just be spent soil that gets dumped. And then again, concerned with sediment delivery and lack of any kind of buffers, and this is a road that was put in kind of up on the ridge there that's sort of failing down. And then again, the tank up there, this is another stream that was diverted at the headwaters. Again, I got a couple slides in here on sediment delivery. This is at the same site, and this is a stream that's already 303D listed for sediment and getting more sediment, and obviously it's an issue for salmonids, especially. This is a coho stream as well. So I've touched on this a little bit already, but just to go over it, impacts on fish and wildlife. So we have some headwaters amphibians that are species of special concern, southern torrent salamander. It's extremely desiccation intolerant, so when people are diverting streams up at the headwaters, it kind of has nowhere to go if there's nowhere moist that it can burrow into. And then coastal tailed frog, again, these guys need cold, clear headwater streams. And the same with the salmonids, coho, steelhead trout, Chinook salmon. They're affected by lower dissolved oxygen, sediment, turbidity, and then, of course, for the spawning grounds when there's sediment and embeddedness. And then Pacific fisher, I haven't talked about much because that's one that you hear a lot of talk about with the anticoagulant rodenticides on the public lands grows. But this is a candidate for listing under the ESA, and it's also sensitive to disturbance such as habitat fragmentation and land conversion. So I just thought I'd throw that guy in there too, because he's kind of become the poster child for some of these environmental impacts. But it is a concern on the private lands grows as well. And then again with the sediment, so yellow-legged frog hidden in there. These guys attach their egg masses to rocks in the streams, and their egg masses are hydrophilic, and they gradually attract more water and sediment. So if the water has a lot of sediment in it, that can be very bad for the developing embryos. And then coho, of course, we're concerned with coho streams, and this is a stream that we dove in the fall and found coho and steelhead, and then in the summer, there are a lot of grows upstream and some diversions, so the riffles are being dewatered, the pools are shrinking, and there were no fish there in the summer. And in fact, we have found fish kills on some of these sites, so we do have documented, and these are all coho salmon. And it's unclear as to whether they're, what the source of the mortality, if it's a lack of food from those riffles being dewatered, or if it's some kind of water chemistry issue. So all of this led to a few questions which have driven some of our current research and future directions. So what happens if everyone is pumping water at once? What happens to instantaneous flow? Where are people primarily diverting water? Where are we going to see these impacts? How does that correlate with some of the species that we're concerned about helping out? And then how has water quality changed during first fall flow event and just overall? And so Jim and Adam are going to talk to you a little bit more about some of our next steps as well. And oh my goodness, 16 minutes. I timed myself, so we can maybe do questions, I don't know, but thank you guys so much. This is a photo that I took in the Manila Dunes near Eureka, and it used to say trim your weed, and now it says trim your greed. And I promise that I didn't do that, so I think the court of public opinion is maybe changing a little bit. Thank you.
I know in Butte County, we have a lot of problems with the marijuana grows right here.
Thank you.
And they're taking a lot of land moving equipment and just basically pushing it to the edge of their property, which tends to sit on a cliff. And then the people downstream and on the bottom side of that cliff are coming across the flows with all of the debris. I'm just curious if you're working much in Region 2 with our problems that we're having. And I don't know that they're doing much as far as stream quality monitoring and the impacts of it with that as much as they are just with the general degradation of the habitat where these legal grows are taking place.
I'll say that we want to, and that that's in the works, and there's a lot of talk going on right now about how we can work with, in other regions and, collaborating with other agencies as well. So this is, I mean, I know a lot of people have been working on this issue for a while, but I feel like it's really coming to a turning point in terms of starting to really work on it. So I think that's all in the future.
Thank you, Jen.